Yeah, what's the latest on Ghislaine? What happened to her? What's she doing right now? What's going to happen to her?
Ghislaine, I mean, here's the thing with that. Ghislaine trafficked children for 20 to 25 years. And that's a heavy sentence for trafficking. If you get busted trafficking a child, if you get indicted, you're looking at 15 years to life. And she trafficked multiple children for multiple years, and she was indicted on one count of child trafficking, where she should have been looking at the rest of her life in prison. She ended up getting 20 years, but she's already in a dormitory, which is, that's about as leisurely as you're going to get in a federal prison. And inmates that have been there for years that are on the verge of getting released go to the dormitories. But Ghislaine Maxwell jumped into a dormitory after 2 or 3 years. So she's already being treated very well. And she's trying to find loopholes to get out of prison.
Yeah. I'd be shocked. I wouldn't be surprised if she find out a way to get out soon.
Well,
in the next 2 to 3 years.
Well, what she's doing is, okay, the feds came up with a non-prosecution agreement with Epstein. And the deal was that Epstein would pay back the girls that he would give them settlements. But everybody else that had anything to do with Epstein would not get indicted, was completely exonerated. The procurers were exonerated, the perpetrators were exonerated. And this was the deal that Alexander Acosta worked out. And then it was sealed because it was such a dirty deal that they didn't want anybody to know that it was sealed. And ultimately, there were attorneys that were filing civil lawsuits against Jeffrey Epstein. And the Palm Beach police or Palm Beach newspaper ultimately they were able to get that unsealed. And then what it showed was that everybody that was affiliated with Epstein was completely exonerated from children, from the procurers to the perps. Americans do not want to believe that Jeffrey Epstein was covered up by the government. A lot of it, I mean, it's really in our face that the government covered up Jeffrey Epstein, the federal government, from Alexander Acosta being told to stand down to William Barr. And it's going on now with the U.S. Attorney Damian Williams. He was the guy that put Ghislaine Maxwell on trial. And he was nominated by Biden. And he is the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, which is probably the most powerful federal law enforcement officer in New York City. And it's a post that, I mean, cabinet members and judges and a lot of people have been that. If you're the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, that's very prestigious. Yes. It doesn't get any more prestigious in federal law enforcement.
Now, what does it mean that he was the one who prosecuted Ghislaine?
Okay, so he was the guy. Ghislaine Maxwell's trial was carefully choreographed. They only called 4 witnesses, and those 4 witnesses had only been by Maxwell and Epstein.
Okay.
They didn't know.
No other people.
They didn't know about these other power brokers. And let me reframe myself. They didn't know about these other, they hadn't been by the power brokers. So when they testified, they could only testify about Epstein and Maxwell. And what's really interesting, Damian Williams, I mean, he's part of the, he's part of a very corrupt Democratic machine. He is the guy that is leading the Diddy investigation right now. He's the guy that's
Damian Williams.
Damian Williams. The guy that covered up Epstein and Maxwell is the same guy that's going to be covering up Diddy. Those warrants that were executed in Los Angeles and also in Miami on Diddy's home, where they came out with a bunch of electronics. Okay, what's amazing is they were launched by Damian Williams. Now, why would a guy in New York City be executing search warrants in L.A. and Miami. And I'll tell you why. It's because I believe that P. Diddy, well, his homes were wired for audiovisual blackmail.
Yes.
And there were politicians and big-time celebrities and athletes. And I believe that people got compromised at his parties. And there has to be damage control. And Damian Williams is the damage control. Because Damian Williams is prosecuting that case, we know the fix is in. We don't know exactly what the fix is going to be, but I'll give you an idea of what the fix is going to be.
Okay.
P. Diddy is going to go down. Maybe some other lower echelon guys are going to go down. But none of the people that were... And there's been 8 lawsuits launched at P. Diddy.
Okay.
8 civil lawsuits.
Okay.
2 of them were minors at the time. And then Little Rod, the 5th lawsuit, he was a hip-hop producer. He said that P. Diddy always had minors. There were always minors there at his parties. And P. Diddy had these, like, what he called freak-offs, where I guess it was like a Roman bacchanal kind of a thing. So what's really, when you dig into P. Diddy's past, it's kind of interesting because he started Bad Boy Records with Clive Davis. Mm-hmm. And Clive Davis is a dirty, dirty guy. And people don't really know this about Clive Davis. There was a documentary about Clive Davis, and it showed that he was this benign octogenarian. I mean, it was like an infomercial. But Clive Davis, what's amazing, if you look into his criminal past, it's kind of mind-boggling. He's been indicted 3 times by the IRS for not paying his taxes, and then he's been indicted 3 times for fraud, not paying his taxes. Mm-hmm. And what payola is it's against the law, but it's radio station record companies giving money to radio stations to play
music.
Yeah. And it was outlawed in 1960. And Clive Davis was, when he was president of ABC Records, he was in the biggest payola swindle of all time. It was like $250,000 that they were giving to radio stations. Wow. And then what's really interesting, now we're not done with Clive Davis yet. There was a Genovese guy named Patsy Falcone who got busted with bringing 22 pounds of heroin into the United States. And the feds started digging into Falcone, and then they found that he was in charge of all these shell companies. And he was in business with Clive Davis. Clive Davis, as the president of ABC Records, was giving money to these shell companies that Falcone oversaw, and then they were dividing the proceeds. So with all this criminality that I have told you that Clive Davis has perpetrated, he has not spent 1 day in jail. Mm. The dude has not spent 1 day in jail. So he was the guy that started Bad Boy Records with P. Diddy in 1993.